My mother demanded that I divide my late father's inheritance among my step-siblings. When I refused, she kicked me out of the house and I exposed her cruelty online. We all attend the same high school, but other than each other, we've never been friends. My mother and their father were joined in marriage after nearly 5 years of courtship. Although our families have been living together for 6 years, the wedding was only a formality 3 years ago. Regarding my father, he sadly passed away when I was very small, so I never had a chance to spend a lot of time with him. I was so young when he died that I hardly really remember him. My father's family disapproved of my mother since she was a bit of a party girl and didn't have a good reputation back then, and my parents were never married in the town where they lived. After a brief period of cohabitation, they decided against getting married because his parents would have most likely disowned him. At the age of 27, he received a late-stage leukemia diagnosis. By the time they learned of the illness, it was too late to take any action. Thank goodness, he took the time to settle his affairs and establish an education fund for me for when I grew up, so I wouldn't have to worry about anything and my mother wouldn't have to strain herself to put in a lot of effort when he passed away. Since his lawyers informed me about it when I was very little, I've always been aware of it. The money was being managed by my dad's attorney, but once I became 18, I would have complete control over the fund for many years to come. Following my dad's death, I grew accustomed to spending time with my mother alone. When I was about 8 years old, my stepdad entered the scene. After we dated for a while, the three of us moved in together, living in the same town where she and my dad first met. It was too difficult for my mother, so she moved out of the one we used to live in. Due to the lack of interest on the part of my dad's parents in getting to know me, I have never met my paternal grandparents. My mother's parents are kind enough when we visit them occasionally, but there's not much of a relationship between them. I therefore had very high expectations when I moved in with my stepdad and his children, since I believed that I would at last have a large and happy family. When I was younger, I had high expectations for my new family, and while I don't really blame them for not living up to them, it was disheartening to me at the time. It wasn't like they didn't greet me with a smile or treated me poorly, but there was a noticeable disconnect in the spirit of the group. We shared a home, but we never truly felt like a family, and I was never able to get along with his or my stepchildren. Even though our homes were shared, they never really tried to get to know me or make me feel at home. I gave up after a few months of trying multiple times because they didn't seem all that interested. That was it. I came to terms with the fact that none of us were true family members, rather more like idealized housemates. I didn't make it seem ideal, but my mother was another matter entirely. She received distinct treatment from them. They truly treated my mom like a member of the family, and their attitude toward her was entirely different. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like my stepfather's first wife had been somewhat of a nightmare, which is why he and my step-siblings were content to play happy family with my mother while excluding me. Although I've never met her, I've heard a lot about her, and she seemed like a complete gold digger who left my stepdad all but impoverished following the divorce. His life had to be rebuilt from the ground up. To exacerbate the situation, he was also left to care for my step-siblings by himself soon after the divorce. Their mother had given up custody and left them to go with her new partner. It was probably nice for all of them to meet a woman who is exactly the opposite of his ex-wife, like my mother, but I wasn't really needed in that situation, and that's precisely how they treated me, treating me like a piece of crap. It was just based on feelings and energy I can't quite put my finger on or think of any examples. I always had the impression that although I lived with the family, I wasn't truly a member of it. I used to convince myself that the only comforting thing was that I might have been overanalyzing things. Sometimes I felt like it was getting a bit too much. It may sound strange to admit, but I was genuinely a little envious since it seemed like my mother had at last found her people while I remained an outsider. After a few years, I became resentful of them all because I felt like I had been abandoned or something. It always seemed so trivial and pointless, so I never discussed it with anyone. I therefore didn't want to draw attention to it by speaking out about it. That was the way life was. Though I wasn't happy about it, I was satisfied regarding the events of a few days ago. I have spent the last few weeks searching for colleges because I need to start applying for admissions as I will be graduating in a few months. As I mentioned earlier, my mother had always informed me that there was a fund put aside specifically for me, and I was going to use it, so I'm not concerned about the money. However, my mother told me a few days ago that she needed to talk to me about something very significant. She informed me that my stepfather was unable to save enough money for his children's college education, and that's why she required my assistance. I also gave my step-siblings access to the funds from my college fund. Jackson was going to enter college at the same time as me, having taken a year off. That was the true topic of discussion. My father had made it very clear in his will that only I would have the authority to decide how I would spend the money, so legally speaking, my mother was not allowed to manage the cash following my 18th birthday. To be really honest, I didn't want to give my step-siblings any of the money to begin with. Neither I nor, I'm sure, they thought of them as family. Secondly, even in the unlikely event that I used all of the money my father had set up for me, I still wanted to use it for myself when I moved into my own apartment and for other things that kind of money may really help me get a head start before I began earning. Since I attended a public school rather than a private one and my mother didn't have to pay for my education, I had already saved a significant amount of money thus far. Since I was also a fairly outstanding student, I wanted to attend whichever institution I applied to and was accepted into, with the hopes of receiving a scholarship. I'd never given much thought to money, but as I grew older and approached my 18th birthday in a few months, I began to consider earning and saving money. Thus, it didn't seem like a good idea to give my step-siblings money from my funds. I therefore informed my mother that I didn't think it was necessary to share the cash with them. Jackson could have taken out a student loan like millions of other young people if he had truly desired to attend college. I didn't even protest with my mother when she remarked that I was being selfish in response to my answer. Yes, I was being self-centered, but I didn't think that was a bad thing. I told her that I was being selfish and it was okay because I didn't think of my step-siblings as family. Rather than getting into a fight with her at that moment, my mother became enraged with me, perhaps considering my words to be tantamount to a crime. I told her the truth that I didn't consider my step-siblings to be family, and it took me a few seconds to even realize that she was going insane. On the one hand, the family had been treating me like an outsider for the previous 8 years, and she had never seemed to notice it, so the double standards were absurd. Perhaps, though, she was simply unaware of it and didn't care. But for no apparent reason at all, I had to treat them like family when it came to me. I made an effort to talk to her in a calm manner without getting in her face, but it was useless because she was already becoming upset with me and calling me names like that. After waiting for her to stop screaming at me, I told her that I wouldn't be changing my decision and that she was free to continue ranting at me. Screaming at me was never going to achieve anything other than further polarize me and decrease my desire to lend a helping hand to them. After I stated that, my mother cooled down a little, and I thought that we would finally have a reasonable conversation and that I would be able to express my emotions. However, I was foolish to think that. I had completely forgotten that my feelings were unimportant in that household, and happiness for my mother, stepfather, and step-siblings was the only thing that counted to them. My happiness was of no importance. My mother gave me a week to make up my mind. When she calmed down, she said that she would have no choice but to throw me out of the house after that. It was so absurd that I assumed she was kidding. She denied it to me, though, and she would soon no longer even be legally required to let me remain with them because I would no longer be a child, as my birthday was approaching in less than a month. Therefore, if I didn't agree to share with my step-siblings the college fund that my father had set up especially for me, I would be out of the house and entirely on my own. For the sake of my step-siblings, I could scarcely believe my own mother would say such a thing and put me in such a terrible situation. She warned me to proceed cautiously and consider my options carefully because this choice could end up costing me everything. Back when I was meant to be her own flesh and blood, she then exited the room, leaving me to sit there and try to take in what she had just said. Being treated that way by my own mother was extremely offensive. I also decided that day that I would pay whatever price to leave this house. I then started chatting with my friends, telling them that I was going to move out for my 18th birthday and that I needed help finding an apartment of my own. I conveyed to them the seriousness of the issue and all that my mother had said. I was aware that after I turned 18, I would inherit the entire sum and be free to decide how I wanted to use it. Sure, I would have to be frugal and pick my college and degree very carefully, but it would be worth it since I would be able to move out and live on my own instead of forcing my family to put up with me, or rather, put up with me at least from this point on. Because it was abundantly evident to me after that talk with my mother that I had no place in that home at all. In actuality, I was a mere afterthought. I had not been overanalyzing anything all these years, since I hadn't really anticipated this. I may have even been overthinking things. After a few days, I heard from a friend that because we were interested in the same field, she was able to talk to a relative of mine who was applying to the same colleges as me. My buddy had recommended that I get in contact with her since she wanted to be independent from the start and was planning to live in an apartment. We could thus get an apartment together and live there if we ended up attending the same college. I thought it was a brilliant idea, and almost immediately, I contacted my friend's cousin. We sorted things out, and I informed her about my circumstances as well. She seemed really understanding, and I could tell she was a good person that I would get along with. That aspect was taken care of, and my main concern was where I would reside until classes began, since there were still a few months until then. But my friends assured me that I could move in with them until classes started, so it was actually very simple for me to work that one out. I was willing to follow through with the messy and dangerous plan because anything would be preferable to living with my mother and these people. I was receiving terrible treatment following my altercation with my mother, and by horrific, I don't mean that they were abusing me verbally or physically or anything else, but what they were doing was much more degrading. They had united against me and were behaving as though I were the most repulsive thing that had ever been. For example, if I walked into a room, everybody would immediately cease chatting and retreat to their respective rooms. They would constantly give me the side eye and act as though I had done something wrong by not even speaking to me. I felt like running away since it was so uncomfortable and humiliating. It took me some time to organize things for myself, but I decided that I was going to leave this place as soon as my friends were prepared to take me in. I made the decision to tell my mother the truth and walk away the day she contacted me once again to see if I had changed my mind. I informed her that, in actuality, I would be leaving this area and that I had not changed my mind. I said that I could no longer put up with the crazy treatment I had been receiving from her and her family for the past week. I informed her that I had already had conversations with a few friends and that I would be residing with them until I could move out of this place and begin college. I told her that I didn't want to see her ever again and that I wouldn't care if she kicked me out. I had a plan, so I wasn't shocked when my mom started yelling at me again, telling me that I had to leave her house because this was not the place for ungrateful, self-centered brats like me. I was relieved to see the last of them and went with a grateful feeling. However, that didn't mean my strategy was over. I had been thinking of ways to get even with my mother throughout the time I had been alone in my room. My life had altered drastically ever since Mom wed my stepfather, and not in a pleasant way. But she seemed content with her new family and didn't even seem to care about it. It was now very clear that she didn't care about me at all, and that her stepkids were more important to her than I was. I had attempted to hide my own emotions and be pleased for her. I was feeling really bad about the way she was treating me, and I decided that I could not stand it any longer for this reason. As soon as I left the house, I made the decision to tell everyone the truth about her and what type of person she truly was. I didn't want her to be able to contact me or even express her disappointment in me because I knew that no one in their right mind would ever agree with what she had said to me. That was the only reason I had waited a week to leave her house and then discuss her absurd demands. I was aware that after moving in with a friend, I made the decision to write a post about my mother online. I wrote down what had happened and how my mother had yelled at me for no other reason than that I refused to give money toward my step-siblings' college fund. My mother never seemed to mind that I said that none of them had ever treated me like family. It only became an issue when I subjected them to the same treatment. I mentioned the unfair treatment of people. I also noted how, after moving in with her new family, she had all but forgotten about me, and based on the way she had been acting toward me for refusing something utterly ludicrous, I believed her to be the most self-centered person on the earth. In my situation, any reasonable person would have refused, as the money she was referring to was a bequest from my father to me. I didn't consider it fair to expect that I would share it with folks who never made me feel like a member of their family, and it wasn't for anybody else to utilize. If my step-siblings had shown me any kindness at all, I might have even given it some thought, but that was not the case in this instance. I wrote that one post as a way to vent my intense frustration. Since a lot of people, including the friends and children of my father, followed me, I realized that this had a bad effect on my mother. I simply didn't care at the time, though, and I just wanted to get even with her. Since I only had one parent and my grandparents weren't really involved in my life, she had, in all honesty, been my only source of happiness and support. She was my first and closest friend, so it seemed like a major betrayal when she decided to prioritize my step-siblings above me. I didn't care about the repercussions. I just wanted to get it all out of my system since I was so hurt. I made the post, and the outcome was precisely what I had anticipated. My mother told me in multiple messages that I had destroyed her life because everyone had viewed and shared the post so many times among her friends. My mother enjoyed a fair amount of popularity, so it was not shocking that people were merely seeking an opportunity to spread rumors about her, and I had given them exactly what they wanted. She had called me multiple times, but I never picked up the phone or returned her texts. I had thought that writing that post would help me feel better, but I was just unhappy. However, my mother's subsequent letters to me just made me feel worse about my choice. Her text messages made it clear to me that she was really conflicted about this. She made statements like she never expected me to do something like this, and she thought I was a kind and compassionate person. However, I was the complete opposite of each of those. She also found it hard to accept that I was no longer her daughter. Then, pulling out all the stops, she informed me that if my father had been alive today, he would have seen this spiteful and evil side of me. He would be extremely let down and wouldn't even desire a relationship with me. That struck a chord with me, and I thought I was acting in a very bad way. I began to question everything, and that's ultimately how I ended up here. I'm not even sure whether it was appropriate of me to withhold my money from my step-siblings at this point. After what I did, I'm not even sure if I can face my mother and the others again, so I'm not sure whether I should try to set things right. However, this could also be a very cunning attempt to control me. If so, that's why I need your assistance so that I can finally reach a decision now that everyone is aware of the facts. I apologize for not sharing my education funds with my step-siblings and for posting a derogatory message about my mother. First update. Hello, first off, thanks so much for your reply. Many of you sent me very nice notes, which improved my self-esteem and gave me confidence in my work. That's probably what I need to view things for what they really are. I was going to give my mother another chance because I wanted to think that she wasn't a nasty person and that there was good in her. What kind of mother, though, says and acts in the ways that she did? Simply put, she is a bad person, and rather than attempting to resist it, it's time that I embraced it. To ensure she couldn't get in touch with me again, I blocked her. I was aware that if she texted me once more, it would simply be to control me or remove the post. I have no desire to remove that post. It should remain up until she gives me an apology. Anyhow, she was informed by my friend's mother that I was living with them, so she is aware of my location and how to get in touch with me. Even though I'm aware of this, I'll interpret her lack of communication with me as an indication that she doesn't value my friendship and instead is more concerned with maintaining her own reputation. Second update, it has been 2 weeks since I moved out of my stepfather's house and moved in with my friend. I didn't communicate with any member of my family at all after that post. I did attend school for a few days, and I did run into Emily a few times, but she would simply give me a really ill look and act as though I hadn't even arrived. Not unexpected, given that they are essentially pros at acting as though I don't exist. For the previous 8 years, they had been doing this. It must have been simpler for them now. In any case, my mom eventually paid me a visit yesterday night. She said that it included all my leftovers when she brought a black plastic bag, which is often used for trash, and put it in the living room. All of the stuff I could fit into my duffel bag before leaving my residence. Really, the fact that she had packed my belongings in a garbage bag seemed a little offensive, and it was even more offensive when she left everything on the living room floor and left me to gather it. When they watched all of this happen, my friend's parents were horrified. They took it upon themselves to quarrel with my mother since they did not find my mother's actions acceptable in the slightest. They advised her that instead of treating me so badly, she had to show more sympathy for me because I am her only daughter. She was severely reprimanded by them, but she didn't seem to care. She informed them that since they were the ones housing a delinquent like me, they had no right to discuss her parenting methods. I was far from a delinquent, so I nearly laughed out loud when she stated that she had known that I was a scholar student. Really, it wasn't necessary for me to bring it up, but I nearly did. My buddy, who defended me, begged my mother to stop screaming and expressed her gratitude that her parents were not like my mother at all and had empathy. After a little altercation, my mother became very irate and departed. I felt really grateful for my friend's parents, though I don't think it was really necessary. They did defend me, and I am so grateful for that. It was incredibly moving since this is probably the first time in my life that I have had someone fight for me. Nevertheless, given the reception she received yesterday, I doubt my mother will be returning anytime soon because I wouldn't dare come around here again. And since I'm tired of the drama right now, I sincerely hope that she doesn't show up. I'm ready to close this chapter on my life and move on, but if she keeps coming back, I won't be able to do that. Thus, I hope and pray that this is the last time I encounter her. Third update. Hi everyone, it's been a long time. I have been absent from the scene for some time now, several months I believe, but I can't take the blame for it. It was because I was attempting to get into a good college by applying to them. I worked so hard for the scholarship, and it finally paid off. I'm currently enrolled at the school of my choosing, and yes, I'm following the strategy one devised. Months ago, we decided to rent an apartment and live together. My friend's cousin, who was applying to the same colleges, also got in. She's a really sweet girl, and that only makes her even more special because she's my friend's cousin. I am able to stay in contact with everyone in this way. I've had a lot of emotional challenges over the past several months, but my friends have been there for me through it all, and I can express to you all how grateful I am to have them in my life. I have avoided that thus far, but I know a lot of folks who have horrible parents and families who rely on their friends for emotional support. Now that I know what lengths my friends will go to support me, I truly feel as though they are family. I will always be appreciative of all that individuals have done for me. Sincerely, without everyone's assistance, I don't think I could have progressed this far. This also applies to the individuals in this room who have messaged me and offered such encouraging words to get me through this. My own mother hasn't even tried to text me since I moved out, which is just extremely odd and amusing. She was able to communicate with me and was even bothered that I had unblocked her. I don't really mean that much to her, however. You guys and my friends encouraged me to believe in my own abilities because I could succeed. How complete strangers on the internet helped me more than my mother surprised me so much. However, that is all now in the past. I'm thrilled for the opportunity to start over here, and I'm looking forward to what lies ahead.